Disbarnleby is the premier podcast spotlighting people of color. Every week, we talk news, what we've been playing, and tell you who's invited to the cookout. Our show is all about talking about gaming through a prism of blackness, because we are the culture. Welcome to Chicago, y'all.
Yo, what up, everybody in Chicago? This is Kahlief speaking. This is the Disbarnleby podcast with Kahlief Adams, episode 541 of our show. Massive love to all of you out there in the world. Hope you're all finding yourselves in a good spot. We know that we are in some interesting times, so it is always fantastic to have you here rocking with me on our show, coming and hanging out with us here in Chicago. If you got a chance to check out our split fiction review or our work around Monster Hunter, a review there, please go check that stuff out. It's on the feeds on our YouTube page and on our Spotify page, so make sure you are going and looking and checking that stuff out. We worked really hard on it and definitely had some really good points of view on both those games. You have not playing Split Fiction right now, you are missing out on basically what I think is my front runner for game of the year. And Monster Hunter is also in that mix as well. Lots of good stuff there with me and Cam Hawkins talking about all of that goodness there. Within this week, we have a really fantastic conversation with some folks over from Virtuos Studios, talking a little bit about the kind of pre-production and VFX world. Really interesting in terms of what they do as general managers and what they get a chance to purvey over. And when it comes to some of the things that you wind up seeing in the game that you might not necessarily know how that pipeline works and how that work actually happens. But for this week, if you're not checking us out and subscribe to us on all of those platforms, please go do so. Hit us up with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Shoot us some love over on Spotify. Check out the video versions of the show there and on YouTube. So make sure you're hitting us up on those platforms and give us some subs and some love over there. This week, we had two stories. One that broke this weekend, that was a huge story, and another one that just dropped around PlayStation 5, potentially getting some upgrades. But before we get into that, let's jump directly into the news. First up on the 411 is Death Stranding 2. Got some love over the weekend. Kojima-san was over in South by Southwest, and they had a panel there with Troy Baker and some other folks who are going to be within the game. And they blew everyone out of the water with a 10-minute trailer for the upcoming game that no one foresaw coming. Like, I think people knew that the conversation was going to be popping up pretty soon and that people were going to be digging into it and really excited for it, because we're all really excited for Death Stranding 2. But what we didn't know was that the game was going to be dropping this year. And that in and of itself was something that no one knew. I don't think anybody who was in the mix was paying attention to the fact that Death Stranding might be a game that is coming in 2025 with bigger conversations around Grand Theft Auto being the game that I think most people were expecting to be the biggest game of the season and of the year. It is pretty nuts that that's going to be something that we're going to play this year. I think one of the big conversations around Kojima Productions was, when is Death Stranding 2 going to be dropping? We already know that there are a couple different projects in the mix for him and his studio, and a lot of stuff kind of coming down the pipeline for them. We're still waiting to hear more about the Jordan Peele project that's supposed to be dropping. There's a couple of things in the mix for them. They have a potentially stealth game coming out at some point too. I think the real big driver for this particular trailer was the Decima engine getting shown off again in a way that just showcases that, man, they are just like on the front lines of technology in a way that we have not seen a lot of studios be able to embark on. I think, getting to see Sam Porter and getting to see the space kind of reimagined and brought back to life with what seems like an even bigger landscape than what we've seen before. It looks like this area that you're going to be working in and playing in all these kind of landscapes looks to be much bigger than what we saw in the first game. And, you know, the thing about Kojima is that Kojima drives a lot of his games through very political lenses. Is something that we get a chance to see throughout the entire Metal Gear series. And if you're thinking about the Death Stranding game and how it talked about disconnectedness, and it wind up kind of coming right at, you know, moments around COVID. And now this new game, which broadens out that conversation and maybe even flips it on its head, talking about how maybe we shouldn't have connected in the ways that we have over the past couple of decades, through technology, through the internet, through so many things politically. We get a chance to now see Kojima dig into his bag that I think is probably going to upset some people who are anti politics and games, and probably going to, you know, disappoint people who are, you know, potentially big Kojima fans, because now he's digging into themes and ideas that are ones that, you know, a lot of people don't necessarily want to go to if they're just looking for escapism in video games. So this is going to be a big game, not only for Kojima, but for the Sony PlayStation brand. I think Sony, you know, who's kind of going into a down year with many failed projects. I feel like maybe, you know, with this game being shown this early for a good reason, gives them some space to be able to think about where this is going to lead to in a much broader sense. I wonder if this game now, because of some of those failed projects, maybe got moved up a little bit. Maybe it's something where, you know, or the game was just ready and this was the time frame that it was going to drop. I don't think Kojima drops anything unless he knows it's ready to go. So having this be in the space for them now lends towards that idea being true. And to be fair, this is going to lead into our second story in a minute, but this is going to be a potentially big, you know, system seller for the PlayStation 5 Pro, because I can't see this thing running super sexy on a normal PS5. I'm assuming, because the first game ran fairly well and did, that the technology is there to get them to where it needs to. But I know that this will definitely be a system seller, and I'm sure that they are eking out every bit of goodness out of the PlayStation 5 Pro to make sure that this is the literal showcase piece for the system before Grand Theft Auto potentially comes out. If it doesn't come out this year, then this is going to be the system seller by force for Sony moving forward, which is a good thing for them. They need a big win going into the end of this year, because we're still in March, so we're still in the beginning of it for the most part. But like, there's a couple of games that have been talked about that are still necessary to need for debut. And this will give them a space to be able to do that and have a banger kind of going into it. Like, the visuals on this game are just stupid. Like, this game is going to be the most beautiful game on the system, probably on either system this year. And the big surprise of all of it was at the end of the trailer, getting to see that this game is going to be dropping in March of this year, which is literally, pre-orders are going to be dropping in March for the game, and the game will be available in June 26th will be when this game is available, which again is still very, very close. Like, that is not a long ways off. We are in March, April, May, June. So you got 3 more months before this game drops. I am very, very excited for what this is going to wind up being. I think the other part of this that's going to be really interesting is, again, going back to themes. Like, there are themes about anti-war. There are themes about American imperialism. There's a nod to Solid Snake in the game as well, with one of the main characters throwing on a bandana with what looks like a Metal Gear Rex head being put on another entity. Like, this game is going to be crazy in terms of where it lands for, you know, what this game is going to wind up being and moving into, you know, some new spaces. I'm ridiculously excited for what this game is going to wind up being. As a big Death Stranding fan, I was in a space to be able to see what this looks like. When I got a chance to review it for Rolling Stone some years ago when it first dropped. This game is a day one purchase for me. I am in love with what they've done with the Death Stranding universe. I think Kojima is still one of the best developers on the planet who's really thinking about making dope games in ways that we haven't seen before, and thinking about the technology that we haven't gotten a chance to use, and thinking about themes about all of those pieces in a much more comparable way than a lot of developers do, or at least are allowed to. I think Kojima has kind of given himself license to be able to do that kind of work by being an auteur in his space, and in finding out good ways to connect images and imagery and stylings towards games that matter. So I am hyped for this thing. I'm dying to play this thing. It looks cool as hell. It really makes me want another Metal Gear Solid game in that Decima engine, because that engine is fucking crazy. It is so nuts, the fidelity you get in that engine. Plus, it takes just technology that you have and you own to be able to do something very, very cool in the way that Kojima and team are doing it. I think Death Stranding 2 is going to be probably a Game of the Year contender off rip. I think that's the wild thing about Death Stranding and Kojima is you can put Kojima games up and kind of automatically slot them into a potential Game of the Year position because of how good he is at what he does and the teams that he builds around him. So Death Stranding 2 is coming out in June. We'll be there day one. Hopefully we'll be able to work with PlayStation and get some access and some codes from then. If not, I'll cop it and buy it and play it on a Pro and see how it feels and fits. I'm really excited for what this game is going to wind up being, and if there's going to be a PC version of this that goes out not too shortly afterwards. That would be a really good indicator of what they're going to be doing on the PC side. So very, very excited about that in a much bigger way. Our second story lends kind of directly towards what we just talked about with Mark Cerny having a conversation, or at least the folks over at Digital Foundry bringing up and discussing the fact that FS4 is going to be coming to potentially PlayStation 5 Pro, and what more sounds likely is PlayStation 6 in that mix. Our friend Shinobi over online on Twitter, over on X, shared some information about AMD's new FSR4. It's being co-developed with Sony as part of Project Amethyst, and it'll be re-implemented for PS5 Pro as the next evolution of PSSR. PSSR is their upscaling model that they've patented and used in the PlayStation 5 Pro. Re-implemented is a really interesting phrasing for this, but it'll be coming to games in 2026 and beyond into next gen. Some quick details: Digital Foundry calls FSR4 a huge leap over FSR 3.1, a very, very impressive delivering of quality wins over DLSS 3.7, which is NVIDIA's version of upscaling, AI upscaling, and some areas that DLSS 4 wins out, but we're delighted to see the FSR 4 is surprisingly competitive against NVIDIA's latest. Cerny says our target is to have something very similar to FSR 4's upscaler available on PS5 Pro in 2026 titles as the next evolution of PSSR comes across. Says results are excellent. It's a more advanced approach that can exceed the crispness of PSSR. And I'm very proud to be working with the joint team to be able to do this. This collaboration started in 2023 when PSSR development was wrapping up. Short-term goal is to co-develop neural network architectures and training strategies for game graphics, and we're stronger together than apart. They also say long-term goal is to create a more ideal hardware architecture for machine learning and combine with AMD expertise. And the aim is for PS5 Pro's machine learning hardware to run comparable performance to FSR4 without significant re-architecturing with this new neural network, which is great because that goes back to the re-implementing part of that statement, which is they are not going to be going, and kind of scrapping PSSR and starting over. They're going to try to integrate with FSR4 work, and to be able to kind of do it that way, which I think makes a ton of sense. I think it makes a lot of understanding of what that's going to look like moving forward for them, and what does that mean for the technology going forward. But I think them talking about it in a way that is discussing, joint partnerships in the way that they're working together is important for Sony. And I think even more so, not even for PlayStation 5, which needs PlayStation 5 Pro, which needs it, but PlayStation 6, which needs it even more. And it says the tech has positive uses beyond PlayStation, supporting broad work and machine learning across a variety of devices. The biggest win is when developers can freely move their code from device to device. And Mark Cerny teases some possible path tracing implementation, and that's all that they can say for now. So I think this is a move towards, the PlayStation 6. We heard some rumors of the Xbox Series X, whatever the new version of the Xbox console coming in 2027. I think PlayStation 6 will probably be fairly close in terms of timing when that gets released as well. I know with PS5 Pro being kind of the mid-gen refresh, everyone is kind of looking towards 6, because I think people are still trying to figure out if PlayStation 5 Pro is actually, one, worth the money, and two, is it delivering on the promises that the Sony team has talked about in those much larger ways. It was a really good conversation, me bringing this up on Twitter earlier today, and discussing, like, do we think that the PS5 Pro is actually kind of living up to the hype, even though multiple versions of Digital Foundry work and research and testing has said that it's not necessarily there. It's kind of in the middle of what the expectation was and what we see from a practical standpoint, and the ideas of what's going on there. But it will be interesting to see what does that mean for this next console moving forward, and in turn, what does that mean for the rest of their hardware stack, and where does that mean for, what AI upscaling is supposed to do, and how what's the tangible benefit that you as a player are going to be able to see and feel and kind of understand, like, oh, I spent this money for this, and the balance, I think, for most players is, I want 4K resolutions and I want it to run at 60 frames per second. I think that's the baseline of where we're at in 2025 in terms of technology and what we want. And are the devices and is the technology meeting that task in that way? And I still feel like, even though, games like Monster Hunter and Assassin's Creed and other games like that have a balanced mode, or a mode where you can kind of take advantage of that, or it's been baked into the code itself. Does that mean that you're actually seeing a full benefit there in those ways? Are you actually seeing it work in the way you have an expectation for? That is still kind of, on the table to be discussed in a much bigger way. So yeah, I think there are a couple stories also in the mix too. There's some rumors around an Xbox hardware, Xbox handheld that have come back up of late. I'm going to probably dig into more of that next week and see if any more details pop up about that before kind of reporting on that stuff. But it is more of a rumor has come up more. And I think that's an interesting conversation as well, about like who are the folks who are going to be working on this supposed hybrid between the PC and the console space, with a lot of that moving into what would probably be their handheld for what that is. We've already seen them do some work with Lenovo and Asus. I think Asus and Lenovo will probably be the front runners for any work that goes there, but it will be very cool to see what happens in the long term with all of those pieces, for sure. Before we get into our interview with our friends from Virtuos, I did want to say thank you again to all the teams that have been working with us for our coverage of GDC and all the things that are going to be coming out very, very soon. I'll be heading out to GDC next week and down in San Francisco to be talking to some devs and checking out some games and checking out some other stuff there. So please make sure you're, again, checking out the coverage that we have with us here on Spawn on Me. So until then, we'll have some more discussions about that. But before we go, we have this fantastic interview with two of the folks from Virtuos Studios. We're going to run into that. And then after that, we're going to do a small break. And we'll be back with closing conversations on our episode 541 of the Spawn on Me podcast. So let's go check out the interview right about now. What's good, everybody in Chicago? This is Kahlief here on Spawn on Me, and I'm very excited because we have two fantastic folks to talk to us about their work at Virtuos Studios. We have Becca McIntosh and Kay Arentunen here, general managers for the respective studios over under the Virtuos banner. Kay and Becca, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
So I'm a nerd about the way games are made, and I think you two, as veterans of the space, have so much information that you can share.
Secrets.
So, I mean, you got to give people props when they've been in the space. Like this isn't your first time around the space doing this kind of work. So I wanted to have you both on to talk about the nerdiness parts of both, not only being a general manager, because I think, again, one of the things that we talk about on our show is like aspirational goals for people who want to figure out ways to get into the industry. Also talking about, everyone, when they think about the work of being in the gaming industry, they think of just being a developer, but there are so many different layers of the industry that you can kind of be in. And you two have found some really fantastic work underneath the general manager banner of the work you do.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about and kind of give some information about what exactly do you do at the studios that you're working with. And I want to start off with you, Becca, to kind of kick off the conversation.
Sure. What do I do? That's such a loaded question, but I love it. I fight monsters. No. So at Beyond Effects, as the general manager, my approach is that I have the honor of working for 37. I think they're 37. I've lost count. There's so many. They're wonderful. 37 artists, and I get to represent them and make sure that they're taken care of and they're supported, and they get to work on great projects with awesome clients, that they get to craft these really visceral, vivid visual effects that, in my opinion, give games their soul, bring things to life in a way. And so me as a GM, yes, I have a lot of things like, okay, I help with payroll, and sure, I help with, some marketing stuff and recruiting, but my biggest pleasure is working for all of them and supporting their dreams and goals. So that's how I approach GM. And then I also get to do fun stuff like travel and represent our studio and talk to people like you.
Yeah, I love that. Kay, I'd love to hear your thoughts about working as a GM.
She just covered all the things, though.
Check. Nailed it. You're welcome.
For me, being in the games industry in general is just like one really funny story of serendipitous events. And in general, I think like my role in the industry within Counterpunch is a facilitator, kind of like a talent manager per se, somebody who creates the forum or the space so that the artists can bring things to life, so that the artists can do what they're good at doing, and what I would not be able to do myself. So as she said, there's definitely some travel, there's some schmoozing and like the fun things that I like to do. But it's really just making sure that our team has the opportunity to touch as many games as possible.
Yeah. So talk to me about Virtuos, because I think, Counterpunch, the studio that you're working with, and Beyond Effects, the one that you're working with, Becca, they're underneath this larger umbrella of Virtuos. Explain what Virtuos is in terms of what they do to kind of bring all those independent, kind of smaller, not even smaller, but independent studios together under this one banner.
I'm going to let Kay speak first because I'm newer to the Virtuos family and I'm still learning, but yeah.
So Virtuos is basically what all smaller vendors in the industry aspired to be. When I met Virtuos in 2019, 2020, before we joined the group, I was taken back a little bit because for a company that is such a large company, they represented a lot of what we were doing as a boutique company on a smaller scale. Virtuos is a partner, a hand holder, a co-developer for games to come to and be able to make the games that they possibly would not be able to make themselves. It's an extension of the game company and what they're trying to achieve. For us, what was really important was continuing to be a partner for the people we were working with, and not just like a vendor. And so in the thick of the pandemic, when, I was like baking banana bread, having a baby, getting a dog,
Sourdough.
all the things.
Don't forget sourdough.
Banana bread, not sourdough. I didn't do that one. All the basic things except for that one. When that was happening, I started speaking to Virtuos and just saw a path forward for us in the growth that the industry was experiencing, with this larger kind of parent or umbrella company that could support us in doing what we were already doing.
Yeah, and I think something that stood out to Beyond Effects when we were looking at Virtuos, and we've always danced around them and worked with some of their other studios within Virtuos before we joined, is even though their Virtuos is big, they're about their people. And I think that's something that really stood out, and I know Kay would agree with that, is we're all about our artists and empowering artists, but we're on a small scale. But Virtuos does that on a larger scale with a goal to collaborate and be the best co-development partner, collaborative partner for game projects and publishers and developers out there. And that type of passion for the people and the art really stands out in my mind as to what Virtuos is and does, and why Beyond Effects and Counterpunch work so well within the Virtuos family.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you all talk about not only kind of the work itself, but the people aspect and how important that is to really keep that focus and keep that, at top of mind for building some of the most beautiful games that we've seen on the planet in that space. I do think that in an interesting way, a lot of players don't even understand what co-development is. In the
I don't think anybody does. It means a lot of different things. And the word has changed definition so many times.
Yeah.
We just want to collaborate and make cool shit with people, right? And the best way to do that is to bring forward the best talent with the best intentions, and just let the magic happen. And Virtuos enables that, and Beyond Effects and Counterpunch have always strived to do that as well.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kay.
No, that's okay. So as you said, co-development means different things to different people. And to be a little bit cheesy and go back to, our kind of tagline, we make games better together. That's it. We develop games with the people who are making games and make the development possible.
Yeah. And it feels like, as a take off my semi-developer hat, put on my media hat or my player hat, the work that you all do with your respective studios seems like the perfect mashup of skills, right? Where, Kay, you're working in the kind of pre-production and cinematic space, and Becca is working in the VFX space. Tell the folks at home who, you kind of already understand what cinematics are if you've been playing games for any reasonable amount of time. And I think VFX is a thing that is a term that I think has a lot of different meaning to what you see in game. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about how the two skills that the respective teams have mesh together, and what that kind of how that is displayed to the player when they're playing the games that you all are helping to build.
Oh man, that's such a good question. Okay, so if I take kind of how do you explain visual effects in games, if it's anything that isn't a character, a vehicle, or prop, and it moves, a VFX artist has probably touched it. It can be fire, it can be sparks, it can be explosions, blood, grass, dust, whatever. It can be those stylized pizzazz sparkles that you see, and real-time VFX can cross over from gameplay to cinematics in real time. And we also get to work across the entire production pipeline. So we actually get to work with teams like the ones at Counterpunch on projects by adding visual effects to the cinematic work that her team has done. We'll then go in after, make some really amazing real-time VFX that fits that scene that they worked on to hit the client's dream. And we get to create that together.
If I had to pick a way to describe it for somebody who was not in games, right? It would be a professional relay race where you're passing the baton.
That's a good one.
to your partner studios, and that goes both between our clients and Virtuos, or the individual parts of Virtuos like Counterpunch and Beyond Effects, but also between us and Beyond Effects, or between us and some of our sister studios that we often work with. Prior to coming over to Virtuos, there wasn't a relay race. We were it. Like, we would get the baton passed to us by either a client or one of their other vendors and pass it back to them. But now, as part of this larger team, we're in a relay race together. So we pass the baton back and forth within each other, and also include our client in that relay.
Mm. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Kay, about I love the analogy of the relay race, because it feels like, especially when you think about the work you all do together, people think of VFX as the kind of sauce that happens at the end. People think about it in those terms, but it sounds like that is a continuous collaborative effort throughout the lifestyle of a project. The thing that I'm curious to hear your thoughts about is when clients are coming to you for the first initial discussion about, hey, we'd love to have you kind of work with us for our game. Mm-hmm. How long is that kind of pre-production process at this point? Is it super years out when they're this concept of what we're trying to work with and maybe you can come in and help us? Or is it hey, we just had this thing that just popped into our head and now we want to try to make it real? What's the kind of process look like for pre-production?
It's such a range. Okay, so we have, let's say on a sliding scale, we have the client that we've worked with for 4 or 5 years, from inception to final. And then we have the my house is on fire clients. Right?
Get your buckets.
and those are the two ends of your little rating scale here. And then there's always the in between, right? On an average, I would say 2 years is a pretty comfortable timeline that we're working on a project. And the reason a lot of my team is with us is it's not just one project that the whole team is working on for 2 years. We are touching up 10 plus projects in any given month in various levels of production. But basically, there's the clients who come to us and they're like, hey, we have this idea. We're going to make it in a couple of years. What do you think? And then we'll noodle with them and, ideate and help them choose the right facial rig to use and the right body rig to use, and even support them in finding other vendors to support with us, or talking to our other teams here in Virtuos to support. And then there's the people whose house is on fire. I need to ship my game. Somebody else has been working on it. It looks terrible. Help. Right. And that usually happens with us when it comes to facial and body animation. I can't tell you how many times we've, been still noodling the animation. We're into the final release timeline. So it's really nice to get a year to 18 months. It's extremely nice to get a couple of years on top of that to help choose the rigs and choose, the pipeline. But, we also like those last minute ones because they're the games we wouldn't have worked on otherwise. So,
yeah, and I think you touched upon it a little, Kahlief, in that, VFX is a little bit towards the end of the game production life cycle holistically. But that doesn't mean we don't have R&D concepting pre-production for visual effects. And so we have that same kind of wide range of clients. Some of them come to us, and what's special about our studio is we're able to handle all stages of production, from R&D and concepting all the way through to live support services. So we can do the whole kit and caboodle, as my grandma would say. And so that's what's awesome about our work, is we'll see varying opportunities where a client might come to us and go, hey, can you just throw some VFX on a drawing board and put it in engine and let's see what it looks like. Maybe it'll hit our look dev. And then they go, wow, that's not it. And we iterate with them and take it all the way through to ship. Sometimes we get people who come to us and it's very last minute and they're like, so we had this and we thought we had it, but it's not quite hitting it. Can you help? We're like, okay, let's take a look. Let's see what you need, what's missing. And we get to have those conversations. So it's definitely a wide range of stages of production and client opportunity. And some people on my team really thrive in that concepting, R&D, fast iteration. They really get to push the artistry and creativity. And some prefer the like, no, let's do like the really in-depth last minute, like let's get in there and make it beautiful and visceral and then let it go out into the wild and see how it performs for the gamers. So we get both as well.
It's like letting doves fly into the air. You're like, go, be free.
Go.
Yes.
Truly.
To live on your own.
Off you go.
Don't come back, you 18-year-old student. You can't come back to live with me.
That's right.
I'm happy to hear you both talk about it in those terms too, because I think one of the things that I've been nerding about has been, you know, when you're a newbie in the space, you are kind of getting all the understandings and learnings and jargon of all the things that are kind of coming in. And I didn't, when I worked on my first game, the last game I worked on, I had no concept of what individual teams did within the larger structure of making a game. So I then learned that one of my favorite teams is like the hard surface team. I was like, oh, I know what hard surface team people do now. And now I know what that looks like inside of a game. Looking at the work that you've done over the time that you've been in this space, has there been something specific that you, as a person who played games, that you were like, oh, I didn't know what it took to make that happen, and now seeing how games are made, oh, that's a really interesting thing that I really pay attention to or like or understand in a much bigger and broader way, especially kind of, you know, in the VFX space or in the cinematic space. What's some of the things that you remember now that you're like, oh, that's a really cool thing that happens that I totally get now that I didn't have an understanding for before?
Okay, this is gonna be so cheesy. Visual effects. Can I say that?
Which one was it?
Visual effects. It's my studio specialty. So I came from a background of more brand management, marketing, kind of like production management as my background. And after I worked about 7 years in that field of the gaming industry, I was like, I actually want to like do dev stuff. No, I'm not an artist, except for stick figures. I'm really good at those. And I was like, okay. I was like, where can I look? What can I do? And I started, you know, sniffing around, asking around. And I got to meet the folks at Beyond Effects. And over I think I'm 5 years now, 5 years here, really unpacking what a visual effects artist does and the impact it has to a game. My favorite thing I always joke about is sparkles. Right. And I didn't understand what went into the sparkles. Like, my goodness, there's so much work that goes into pretty little sparkles when you like open a loot box and there's sparkles everywhere and you're like, oh, it's beautiful. I got a legendary item. That's all the visual effects. And it didn't make sense. And then I got to work here and see the artist with the Unreal Engine open and like all of the different processes and materials and shaders and like everything they're doing just to make sparkles. And it broke my brain. And then I was like, oh, I need to do more of this and help them do more of this because everybody needs sparkles.
Okay, any thoughts on your end? Like, what was the thing that you're like, oh, that's really interesting. Now I know that.
Absolutely. So I told you, me being in this industry is like a series of very fortuitous, random, sporadic events. But I'm one of the co-founders of Counterpunch Studios, and when my partner Andrew and I were ideating on the idea of starting this studio in 2011, we sat there and we said, okay, in production, what has been the biggest thorn in our side, hands down? And the answer was facial animation. You know, it was the facial animation. And for the initial, I'd say probably 7 to 8 years of the company's life, all we did was facial animation. That's what we did. We were the facial animation experts. And I don't think anyone realizes how much nuance and how much attention to detail and knowledge of anatomy of muscles, of the muscles in the face, almost to a scientific degree, it takes to be an expert facial animator, you know? And so we chose that, and we really dove into the deep end and hired people who were experts and then trained people up who were experts. So I would say to this day, although we work in end-to-end production and we work in cinematics and we work in even gameplay animation these days. Many people still come to us because the facial animation just is not working. And it's continuously going to take up a large chunk of our business because it's so specific and it takes so much work. And I don't think anyone understands how long it takes to make one of these, feature quality cinematics happen with somebody emoting and speaking, to each other, characters speaking to each other, speaking to camera. It's like an art form of its own.
I would want to sit in a room and just talk to you about that for like hours on end. Because one of the questions that I wanted to talk to you about, I'm happy you led me directly into it perfectly.
Well done.
Get you a podcast. Is I think, one of the things that we have in the conversation in the industry, at least coming from gamers and around a lot of folks within the space, is there's a balance between super high-end, really high-quality work, the amount of time, effort, money, and resources it takes to get there, and this idea that, like, players have an understanding of the end result, but not the understanding of all the pieces that get you there, and how do those things mash up. So you have a lot of, to be fair, uninformed takes about the work, that rummage themselves around in the space when you have subject matter experts like yourselves who can like really dig into the pieces of it. So I say all that to ask you the question of one of the biggest things that we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years has been this conversation around graphic fidelity and the uncanny valley being a thing. From a technology perspective, do you feel like we're still in a space where that's a conversation that you're hearing? Because for me, I'm an old fart, so like I've been playing games forever, and I remember Pong and playing Pong. But now I can make myself in a game. Someone looks exactly like me, right? Have we hit that point yet where uncanny valley is not even a thing anymore, or are we still in a space where we can get there, but it's still a couple years off to get to that really fully human-like perspective?
Should I go first?
Yeah, I mean, you're the cinematics.
Uncanny valley is always going to be there, depending on who you work with, right? I don't think I am not an artist, and although I've been in this industry for longer than I'd like to admit and age myself with. I'd like to think that maybe it's a good thing that people don't understand how much work goes into this, because then it could just be this fun thing that you're playing, right? But uncanny valley will always exist because many people are trying to achieve something in different ways. I don't think anyone understands how much mathematics, coding, processing goes into even the lower quality, like NPC animation, for example, across tens of thousands of lines and like hundreds of background characters that need to be able to emote and say things when triggered, right? Or the anatomy and science that goes into these high fidelity cinematics where you're seeing muscle systems at play. You're seeing people, characters in a game without a shirt, and like it has to look accurate. Our experts at Counterpunch, like when they're looking at a game, they're just like zooming in, and like frame effing each frame to make sure like when the left brow is raised, what happens to the edge of the eye and I can't tell you how many times I've heard the word nasal labial fold, so I just
say that 5 times
so much
fast.
goes into so much goes into
conversation happens in my house every morning.
Exactly, right? Just so much goes into this that I think that in today's industry, uncanny valley can still happen, but it doesn't have to if you're working with the right people. And it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. There's ways to achieve things. There's new tools. There's AI. There's all these things that could be like your worst enemy if you don't work with them, and also your best friend if you can, incorporate them into your workflow. So, have we worked on games that I felt was uncanny valley? Sure, but they probably didn't give us enough time and money for it. Have we worked on games where uncanny valley is a thing of the past? Absolutely. In fact, most of the games we've recently released look amazing. whatever style they are, hyper real, stylized, whatever.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I think, Uncanny Valley is in the eye of the beholder and also the eye of the client and the people who have dreamed the project. And so, our teams come in to match and help deliver on that dream or that end result that they're trying to achieve. And the technology is always advancing. The artistry is always advancing. But I think something that I love about visual effects is regardless of what the client brings us, we're just excited to be able to work on it with the latest tech. Our artists are just little tech wizards, I call them. They just love all the new tech and how they can continue to push it. So I think, sure, there may always be something in the eye of the beholder, but if you're playing a game, you're in it to just like immerse yourself and have fun. And if the visual fidelity helps achieve that, then that's all you can hope for.
Yeah, it's interesting because the conversations about facial rigging and what are the things you can see when you're in those moments where you're like, oh, that's where either it clicks or it breaks, right? You're like, oh, like tongues are weird in that space, right? Where it's like when people are talking and it's that stuff is like those interesting spaces where people kind of do that work, and you can see where it really shines and where it's still kind of getting to a specific level, which is super cool. Becky, you talked.
Fun fact. Yeah. You said tongue, so fun fact. When in mocap, people who lick their lips a lot break our rigs.
So I would break your rig.
Yeah. So
I found something new to break, guys.
Nobody understands that, but
don't lick your lips in mocap.
That's fantastic to know. See, because then you see LL Cool J would probably not pass a mocap.
We have some actors that we call like lip lickers.
It's me. I'm the problem.
We know to charge extra for those people.
I can see Kay now in the booth just handing out chapstick, just like, here you go. Before you get
here's a green apple, here's some water.
Don't come in here ashy. Anyway, moisturize and hydrate before you get into the mocap suit. Look, now I know.
That's the lesson.
Now I know when I go do my 2K session. What's wrong with his face? All his lips are dry. That's kind of funny. Becca, I wanted to talk to you because you mentioned something about tools, and I think that's a really interesting thing as well, right? Like, I think the idea for folks when they are coming into the space is that you should have a fairly, probably wide, but also kind of specialized understanding of the tool sets that you want to use to kind of get into the space. What are some of the tools across your two disciplines that are like you must have a really good understanding of these to be competitive in this kind of market?
I think I'll be a completely different answer from Kay. There's a simple secret to being a real-time VFX artist. And it's one thing. All of the work of a real-time VFX artist is done in the game engine. If you can open up the game engine, navigate it, work in it, build your VFX in it, optimize, etc., that's it. That's the secret sauce. That's it. The other tools are additive, and yes, you're going to use, Photoshop and Substance Designer and Houdini and Embergen and Liquid. There's a lot of cool tools to further that work, but what is the one tool we would like, what is our water? How we stay hydrated in our mocap VFX suits? I don't know. You have to know how to use the game engine and work within it. That's it.
Huh. Okay. Any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So our tool, or the monopoly, we can call it, is obviously Maya. That's kind of the animators, previs artists, whatever tool you use. But something that is understated and I feel just as important is the animator's ability to act. Acting is their key skill, because when an animator is able to act, and kind of relive what they're trying to portray, it just comes through in a more natural way and less uncanny valley. And that's where I feel our creative director excels, is he is constantly practicing acting. And so he can sell a story in a way that a technical person can't.
That's so interesting. That is really cool.
Now I'm like, when I go over to Counterpunch, I need to be careful or practice acting. And bring chapstick. Okay.
And bring chapstick.
I just licked my lips like 5 times, not even thinking about it. It's all
You're gonna think about it all the time now.
Now it's like in my brain. I can't stop doing it now. It's bad. So thank you for.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
That in my brain for this part of the conversation. But I love to hear that because it does speak to. I think a lot of folks, and it leads to the question I want to bring up is. People talk a lot about the hard skills that you bring into a role like these, but they don't really think about I would classify learning how to act or emote in those ways and being emotive as a soft skill that you bring into, air quote, soft skill, that you bring into a job like this. So that's really cool to hear that being a part of, you as a human being and the part of the thing you bring to your job is actually really helpful in that way. That's super, super cool. A question for both of you is, and tell me if I'm out of left field with this, but in your roles, do you deal with talent acquisition a lot, or is that another layer that is in another part of the orgs that you were in?
That's boutique companies. We do everything.
We do it all.
So, perfect. So the question I have for you then is, one of the bigger discussions right now is cultivating talent and bringing people up throughout the pipeline internally. And then, hopefully they stick around and stay with the company. What are some of the things that you're telling people when you go to a job fair, you go to GDC, you go to DICE, you go to, Afrotech, something like that. And they're like, ooh, I would love to work for you. What are the things that you're looking for in talent that is coming in? And what are, you talked a little bit about the tools, but what are some of the soft skills that you're also looking for for folks when they come in to potentially work for y'all?
Would you like to take the lead?
Sure. I think we have 2 things working for us, to be honest with you, when it comes to talent acquisition. One is retention. A large percentage of people who are part of our team, especially our leads, have been with us 10 years plus. Our creative director was hired on as a junior artist many, many years ago. So that's really important because when talent is starting their conversations with us, that is definitely something that we bring up is retention for us is very, very important. We have a very, very close-knit group of people, and it only works because there's the trust that you build up over time. It worked when we went from fully in-house to remote to hybrid to wherever we're going. It really works to know who you're working with. The second portion of that, what we shine, the diamond we shine to lure people in, is getting to work on several projects within a year versus being kind of pigeonholed into like one small project or one part of one project for several years. I think it's really important, especially in today's industry, to have a little bit of variety in your reel, to have a little bit of variety in your day. So I think those 2 are selling points.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm going to unpack here because I actually just came from a wonderful career fair. It was awesome. I love seeing passionate people. The challenge for real-time VFX is, for a long time, I think I'm trying not to date myself or you or anyone talking here. Many moons ago, there were no schools that had degrees in gaming. We all just kind of fell into it and owned our passion, et cetera, et cetera. Nowadays, there are schools that are having, they have degrees, they have programs, and they're wonderful. The challenge with real-time VFX is even though they're working on it, no North American schools can give us out the gate, hireable, 2 quality real-time VFX artists. They're not there. Why? Their programs aren't there yet because they're also trying to teach visual effects for film and TV. That's pre-rendered. It's very different. We're all in engine. And so they have to really dive deep and understand the engine and how to create and work within the engine, which they only spend a little bit of time on when they're doing their degree program. So a challenge for us with talent acquisition is finding people with enough passion and inspiration. I want to be in gaming as a real-time VFX artist, who then have to go self-teach themselves and bridge that gap between their potential degree or the courses they took, and find the right community, find the right tutorials, have the enough drive and passion and dedication and time management, and et cetera, list your soft skills here, to like dig deep and really own that passion and bring it to fruition. And a big part of our talent acquisition is that the real-time VFX community is very niche and small, but damn, do they have amazing, dedicated, passionate people. You could decide right now you want to become a real-time VFX artist. You could join that community and you would have hundreds of people going, okay, here's what you need to do. Here's where you start. Download Unreal, open it, load a game from it. They have a lot of cool tools. Think of a game you love. Okay, Kahlief, you love Legend of Zelda, whatever. We're going to go with that. I don't know why. We love Link and some Zelda. We're rocking with it. Recreate your favorite visual effect from that. Okay, now go through, do it again, tweak it, change the colors, change the parameters, start tweaking, and live and thrive in this rapid experimentation that is real-time VFX that cannot be taught in the schools yet. I think they'll get there eventually. And so when we do these fairs and these the talent acquisition attempts, like we're up against this kind of bridging the gap, because you'll have really passionate people, but they're self-taught and you never know what fundamentals they know or don't know because they didn't understand to ask. That said, the people who are those passionate individuals rise to the top in the community, and the community will lift and support them. So we usually source our talent from community pools, and we know who they are, and they're active in the real-time VFX community. That's a big part for our artists. Most of our artists are not only here at Beyond FX, but they're active members in the community, and so they are all helping and talking to each other. So that's kind of a very different scenario, but
I mean, I love the fact you talked to the idea of not only community kind of helping to uplift and support the work, but also, like, you know, when you go into a lot of tech jobs, one of the first things they ask you to do is, hey, do this coding test and do this other kind of stuff. And, you know, folks who are, not classically trained in some of those spaces, they are finding ways to kind of do that work. But I love the idea of basically reverse engineering, things that you've played to showcase your work and your ability and your acumen for doing the work in the daily job. That's really cool, because then you have to really take the minutia of, like, one, do you really kind of know what the effects are that you're seeing and how they play into the gameplay that you're engaging with. But also, sometimes those things are so fast and so quick that you don't see them in the great. Like, you see them, but you're so used to not noticing them that they kind of fly past you. So it's kind of cool to hear you talk about it in that way. That's rad. I like that a lot. We're time has flown. We're basically at the end of our conversation, but I do want to ask. And again, if you can't answer this, let me know. Give me the, hey, I don't want to answer that. You plead the fifth if you want to. But I think, you two have worked on some of my favorite games on the planet, God of War stuff, Mortal Kombat, some of the things that I'm constantly and still playing in those spaces. When you think back on some of the projects that you've got a chance to work on, what was the most rewarding one in terms of getting, seeing a change in the technology that kind of was like, oh, wow, we're really at the precipice of something different? And what was the most fun thing that you got a chance to see in game that you maybe were like, oh, I didn't have full touch on that, but our teams were working on it, and then you get to see it kind of live in the game. You were like, holy crap, that's cool. What's an example of one of those things for each of you?
I'm putting her on the spot. No, I mean, I can answer that question quite specifically, but I can't, say exactly what I want to say. For me, there was a period of time between 2015 and 2016, and some of the games that we started that started releasing that we had worked on around that time. Yeah. And I don't really want to specify exactly which game, but there was 2 or 3 games, and you can go look up what we worked on around that time. But there were a couple of games where the female characters were just really funny and really cool. And the facial system had just changed. We were moving into this facts-based, muscle-driven animation for all of them. And they were superheroes or villains or whatever. And there's just a lot of like these little quips and things that were happening in the game. And everyone just looked so fun and cool and like sassy, you know? There's like a whole game of sassy women. I love that game.
I know what she's talking about, and I love it too.
Yeah, it was just really, really fun to do that. And then the quips were getting released online, and I would just go watch them again and again and again. And it was some of my favorite characters from various, you know, movies that I'd seen coming to life in games. And I think before that, I wasn't connecting with the characters as much. And then after that, I just am constantly now looking for the sassy lady in the game.
With the eyebrow quirk?
With the eyebrow.
Yeah. And the nasal labia folds, right?
Little scowl, you know?
I rock with it. I mean, I love it. Becca, what are your thoughts on that?
Maybe a wink.
I think so. How I'm trying to like, how can we safely say this? So for me, something that's really, actually, it's really cool. We've seen a lot of games start wanting to break stuff. I don't know what that says about us as gamers and developers, but it's all about environments collapsing, destructibles, destruction, break it down, make it look real. And you know, there's multiple ways to do that. And we started to dive into mastering one of the ways within the engine. And our team did it. Now it's not released yet. But seeing how far they come from, like, all right, let's pull back this curtain and like get in the weeds, let's test it. I remember when we were a couple of years ago starting to go, can we even do this? How do we do this? How do we approach it? And I have over 30 like dedicated real-time VFX artists, all artists, all art genres, all engines, all spectrums of specialties and different apps that they like to use. And they all work together to come to, here's how we master destruction. And now they're doing it in a very, very cool game. Can't say what. It'll come eventually, and it'll have a lot of destruction, and people will go, oh, that looks so real. Because that's what I do every time I walk past their desks as they're working on it. So that's been amazing. And then the other thing that I find joy in, I'm not an artist, right? I'm a gamer. I like seeing my artists' smiles when they see their work and gamers' reactions to it. Because I think holistically, you know, yeah, we do the fire and the smoke and the blood and the whatever, but seeing people react to an announced trailer that has your work in it. And yes, they're like super hypercritical of their own work. Like, oh man, that one mote, I should have, it's pixelated. Oh, I hate it. But at the end, like their big smiles are what make me really happy. So anytime we get to see something released and announced, and yes, you can go look at our website and see what I might be talking about, especially very recently, seeing their joy and how the gamers reacted, because they're gamers themselves, and having that come full circle, like, wow, I did it, and they're happy and they like it. That's the best part of it for me.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that, because again, I think, you know, one of the main reasons our show exists is to kind of talk through and talk to folks who are, you know, doing the work and, you know, celebrating the art of making games and talking to folks who really get a chance to see that on the day-to-day. And it was a pleasure to hang out with both of you today to talk about all the work you're all doing. And again, as a nerd of all the things, it is really cool to hear you all talk about, you know, the nitty gritty a little bit. I could swear I'd steal you both for like another 2 hours and talk about all the in between little bits and pieces of it. But I would love to have you both on again to talk more about the work you all do in the future, and you know, when some of those projects get released, we can talk about some of that stuff. But like, again, thank you so much for spending some time with me today and talking about the work you are doing at Virtuos. And
thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, being a nerd in this industry is not the outlier, right?
No,
it's like
we're all nerds here.
Yeah.
We're nerds.
Right.
We're nerds, please.
I'm proud of it. So yeah, we'd love to talk to you again anytime soon, and this is really fun.
Would love that for sure. I will figure out a way to make sure that next time I'm in the mocap booth, I have some chapstick.
Lotion.
That is one big takeaway that I'm pulling in from our conversations today. If you have a dry mouth, you can't be in the booth. Moisturizer.
Campy in a mocap suit.
Get your electrolytes in.
I'm so scared to go over to her studio now.
We're gonna hand you chapstick.
I'm gonna be a GDC. Just look at my lips, look like a LL Cool J.
That's a nice little GDC handout. Chapstick.
Chapsticks. Yeah.
Want a mocap? Here's some choice. Here's chapstick. Thank you both for being here. You both rock, and excited to see both of your respective studios continue to grow and continue to prosper, and the Virtuos Studio crew do some fantastic things in the world. Everybody at home, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to go check out more of Spawn on Me right after this.
Hey there, my name is Naomi, and you might know me from internet things like hosting for IGN. I'd like to introduce you to my new show, This Week in Gaming. It's 20 minutes, short and sweet, and every week I go through all the important gaming news that you need to know, and then we have folks on like Kahlief Adams, who shows up quite often, talk about all the important news. And you get to listen to it wherever you get your podcast, so it's easy to find. Just look for This Week in Gaming and make sure to give it a follow. And every week, Monday at 9 p.m. Pacific time, you get a brand new episode. I hope you'll join me.
Yo, we are back. We have another conversation with some dope folks on Spawn on Me, and nowhere else can you get this wonderful, awesome conversations and all these awesome interviews with really fantastic folks. Massive shout out to our friends over from Virtuos Studios, coming by and hanging out with us and coming to chill with us. Becca and Kay, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us during the show. I think they are brilliant. I loved getting a chance to talk to them about all those things. And LL Cool J popped up many, many times during the conversation as well. So massive shout out to them over for Virtuos Studios, running their respective teams. Please go check them out on LinkedIn and check out more of their work, in the work that they're doing in the video game industry. And we're going to get up out of here for episode 541. We have more dopeness coming to you with more conversations next week, and more. I'm working through my Assassin's Creed review right now, playing through that. I'm playing a couple of other games as well. Just started jumping on WWE 2K25, so that's a ton of fun, and playing that as well. So lots of discussion points to come up very, very soon about some of those games as well. So until next week, massive love to you all. We hope you have a wonderful week. Wash your hands, wash your butt, and please stay safe out there and give some love to all the people out in the world that you can. Until then, much love, peace, and hair grease. We out. Later.